He said it's my 41st time. Basically, I've lost count. Hey, I love coming here. It's great. And I must say, whoo, wow, is there anything that's not new here in the church? Because when I was here a year ago, the parking lot, remember, was torn up, and someone said it was just finished like a week ago, the parking lot. But wow, this, from a level of 0 to 10, you guys are a 42. This is amazing. Really beautiful facility and carpeting, and look at this, and lit, and whew, I'm in Carnegie Hall in New York City. Well, I'm happy to be here. And how many of you, this is the first time you'll hear me? I think almost all of you. Okay, new. Okay, well, welcome. So the program's about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes or so, and it's classical music. It's not hymn arrangements. And I'm going to introduce the pieces and share with you music, a lot of different music, and then share my testimony. Music's not the most important thing in my life, but Jesus Christ. And then we're going to also end up with singing just a few Christmas carols. I've done that all the years I've done here. Everybody knows the first verse of every Christmas carol, so you don't need to project it. You don't need a hymn book. And we're going to sing maybe 3 or 4 Christmas carols, and with Silent Night, just in the spirit of the season and decorations and things like that. So, I don't know if you know, but yesterday was Beethoven's birthday. Yes, he's 253, and yep, he was born in 1770. And actually, yesterday, a year ago, I was in Germany doing a concert in the city he was born in called Bonn, B-O-N-N. It's a major city, industrial city in the western part of Germany. It's a big city. And I played a concert on his birthday, 1 kilometer from the house he was born in. So I started the day by going to his museum. I mean, it's a very historical place now. His whole house is now a museum where Beethoven was born. And there were people from all around the world. I mean, from Asia, from South America, from around Europe, because they were going to be there on his birthday to hear Beethoven. And then I had a concert, a big concert. It was packed out in the evening, and giving a concert on his birthday in his town. And it's interesting, when you drive into Bonn, the name of the town is Bonn, B-O-N-N, and they have it listed as Beethovenstadt, Beethoven City. Oh, by the way, it's called Bonn. You know, we don't call it Bonn, we call it Beethoven City, because boy, it's Beethoven's everywhere, where he played here, where he played there, and stuff. So this is an early work by Beethoven. It's a very dramatic piece, 3 parts. The first part is lively, the second part's a little dance, the fourth part is very fast. And this early Beethoven, he's really, I always say, grabbing your throat. Dramatic, intense. So it's the early work by Beethoven. And I understand the bench is new. They couldn't find the old one. Just inaugurated it. Can I just say one thing briefly? Can you not mic the piano? Yeah, because, is it mic, isn't it? Was it mic? It sounded like it was mic. Was it mic? Okay, yeah. much. Thank you. Well, next I'm going to play you a piece by Mozart, and you've all heard this piece. It's a very famous piece. Mozart actually taught Beethoven for a while. And so it's a part of a larger piece, but for time and things, this is just the famous part, the Rondo alla Turk. So I think you'll all recognize it, but this is the Rondo alla Turk by Mozart. Thank you. So next I'm going to play you some pieces by one of my favorite composers, Debussy, French composer. I've done some other Debussys here. These are some new ones. I don't know if I've played them or not, always here or not. So Debussy wrote a famous piece, Clair de Lune. There's always an imagery. I'm not playing Clair de Lune. It's on my recording. But there's always a story or a picture to his music. So the first piece is called Ondine. Now, Ondine is a fairy of the water, like a mermaid in that sense. But it's called the Fairy of the Water. And you all know Ondine because she is called the Little Mermaid by Walt Disney. So you all know the famous story 20, 30 years ago, The Little Mermaid. It was a favorite of my daughter. She's now 43, but when she was like 6, she loved The Little Mermaid. And so Ondine is based on a French story that she lives in the water and she plays all day. And while she plays in the water, she agitates the water. So there's a lot of water sounds in this piece and a lot of this playfulness in the piece. And at the end of the piece, there's what's called a jet d'eau. A jet d'eau in French is a fountain of water. So she's dancing, the water just gushes up at the end 2 or 3 times. And if you close your eyes, you'll feel the water spraying on your face. If not, you'll feel my sweat spraying on your face, you know. So this is the famous Undine. You go to Europe and you'll see sculptures and paintings and titled Undine. Even not French paintings, but Italian paintings, because it's a very famous story in French history. Then the next piece is called Heather. In French, it's called Bruyère. So heather is a low-growing plant that grows a lot in Scotland. In fact, there's some poems called The Heather in the Glen. And it has a beautiful purple flower. And I've been to the Highlands of Scotland. In fact, in my piano room, I have a little sprag of heather, which is about 20 years old, and it's all dried up, but it reminds me of this piece. So Debussy, the composer, went to an art exhibit in Paris of Scottish and British painters. And he saw all this beautiful purple heather that he wrote this piece. When I was in Scotland and saw the heather, you could drive 30, 40 miles, and all you see is miles of this beautiful heather in the springtime and in the summer. So it's a very, very delicate piece, very soft. This is where Debussy said that by droplets of sound, he creates a mood. And it's very delicate. You'll hear a bird in the sky. There's shifts in the piece because heather is not a tree, it's a shrub. So the wind is dancing on it. You know, it's like watching waves of water, but waves of the wind on the top of it. And at the very end, you'll hear this echo of this heather theme kind of calling out to you. The third piece, I know I played here before, but it's a very wonderful piece called The Sunken Cathedral, and it's based on a poem. You're on the coast of France, and it's very foggy. And after 30 seconds, you're going to hear 3 soft bells. The water starts moving, the bells get louder, the water moves, the bells get louder, and then out of the water comes this gigantic Gothic cathedral. Now, it took them 200 years to build a church in Europe, so this gets pretty intense, and you'll hear it, you'll know when it's coming up. I mean, all the bells in the whole cathedral are blasting. The water starts moving again, and the whole cathedral sinks down into the water. That's why it's called the Sunken Cathedral, or in French, La Cathédrale Engloutie, the cathedral engulfed. You hear the fog returns, you hear 2 soft bells, and the piece ends. So let me just say this. In the first 10 seconds of each piece, you're going to say, oh, that's the water piece, the mermaid playing. Oh, that's the delicate, you can smell the heather. And then the 3 bells and the cathedral going up and down. The 3 pieces by Debussy. see the cathedral going up, coming down. It's a very, very amazing piece. Because Debussy actually said that by droplets of sound, he creates, you can take one note and it will create a certain image of the music. Well, next I'm going to play you a piece by the Russian composer Rachmaninoff. And I like to do research when I do my music. And if I can find out what Beethoven had for lunch on a day that he wrote a piece, I want to know what he had for lunch. So interestingly, Debussy was French, wrote these pieces in 1907. And the piece I'm playing next are by Rachmaninoff, and wrote his pieces in Russia in 1907, in Moscow. And I think two of them were actually written the same month. So here you have Debussy writing his music, this delicate droplets, and Rachmaninoff writing his music the same month, the same year, and these pieces that I'm playing here tonight. So Rachmaninoff, he didn't believe in droplets of sound, he believed in 10,000 notes. He believed that in a wave of emotion, you feel the impact of the music. So it's the same idea, whether being hit by a droplet of a little water droplet or a wave, a 30-foot wave from Hawaii, you're going to get knocked over in that sense with the music. So three pieces. So Rachmaninoff's music is described as very melancholy. He suffered from a lot of depression. He gave up composing at one point, and then he got help and counseling. This is in 1890s in Moscow, and came back. It was helpful to him, and he became one of the greatest composers. So I call it excruciatingly beautiful. It's excruciating, but boy, is it powerful, beautiful. So there's a lot of sadness in it, and he uses almost every key of the piano. In the first piece, he uses 84 of the 88 keys because he had the biggest hands that ever played the piano. Now, I have a pretty good sized hand. This is what they call an octave, 8 notes. You can see I can actually play 11 notes, but Rachmaninoff could play 15 notes. 15 notes. He could cover 30 notes on the piano, a third of the piano, because the piano is 88 keys, with his two hands. So he gets some sounds that are just overwhelming. So the first piece is a prelude that he wrote, has a lot of sadness, very brilliant, uses 84 of the 88 keys. The second piece is what I call excruciatingly beautiful. It's about 4 minutes long, but I wish it was 25 minutes long because every note is just weighed with this sadness, but exquisite. The third piece, he said, was one of his favorite. It's called the Prelude in B minor. It's a very Russian-sounding piece, and here he uses all 10 fingers. I mean, here he's really blasting the piano, the power of the piano, the power of the emotion in that sense. So these are three pieces by Rachmaninoff. me play one more piece, share a little bit about myself, by Beethoven. And you've all heard this piece. It's a very famous piece called the Turkish March. Beethoven heard this played by some street musicians in Vienna, and he wrote it down in his book. This is before he lost his hearing. And then about 20 years later, he wrote this piece. So it has the famous march, which you'll all recognize, and then these little variations, all sort of a embellishment on this march. So you'll hear the march, these 6 variations in the march, the famous Turkish march by Beethoven. Thank you. He's put in these nice spotlights. Makes you sweat more. You're under the lights. Well, before I play a last piece or so, I'd like to as the other times I've been here, share about myself, my story, being here in the church and sharing. So my story begins actually with my parents. My father was born in Eastern Europe, in Romania, in 1905. My mother was born, at that time the country was called Czechoslovakia. Today it's called Slovakia, but at that time it was called Czechoslovakia, and she was born there in 1915. And they were both very religious Orthodox Jews. So the Orthodox Jews are the strictest Jews that follow the Jewish faith. They want to follow all the laws that God gave to the Jewish people in what's referred to as the Torah. The Jews, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the first 5 books of Moses, the Torah, and all the laws that God gave to the Jewish people through Moses. And my parents left Europe in 1940 because of one person, and his name was Adolf Hitler. If my parents stayed in Europe, they would have definitely died. My father was 35 years old in 1940. My mother was 25 years old. They would have definitely ended up in a concentration camp and perished. If you didn't leave the town, if you stayed in your town, you didn't survive. You had to leave. 11 months after my father left Romania, the Nazis came to that section of eastern Romania and gathered all the Jews, about 10,000, and killed all of them. And 2 of them were my grandparents, my father's parents. So my parents had to get out of Europe, like a lot of Jews, and they ended up in South America. So there was an open immigration to a few countries in South America because they had heard what was happening in Europe concerning Jews. And one of them was a small country right on the equator called Ecuador. And the capital, Quito, Ecuador. They lived there from 1940 to 1950. My brother was born there. My sister was born there. My mother was pregnant with me in the spring of 1950. My father then filled out paperwork. He wanted to bring his family to the United States. He got permission. They came through New York City, and I was born 5 months later in October of 1950. And I was raised in a very, very religious Jewish home. My grandparents died for being Jewish. My parents suffered for being Jewish. And I was instilled with all my Jewish heritage. I went to public school during the day, and then I went to school in the synagogue, and it was called Hebrew school. So there are Catholic schools, there's Protestant schools. There are not many Jewish schools, but there are Jewish schools. We had a huge synagogue, 5,000 families. It was gigantic. And so we could support a Hebrew school, a yeshiva, where you study being Jewish. So I went to Hebrew school. I learned Hebrew. I learned all about being Jewish. I learned hundreds of prayers. And I went 5 days a week for 8 years. So this was not a 2-week course on how to be a better Jew. If you did this, it was a commitment for your whole life. I started when I was 8 years old until I was 16. 5 days a week for 8 years. All my friends were Jewish. All my relatives were Jewish. I remember I'd wake up in the morning, I'd pray for a half an hour in Hebrew, and then I went to school, and something unusual happened. I was 12 years old, and I began to develop a very foul mouth, a bad mouth. I could lie to my teachers. Not a lot, but enough. I could lie to my parents. I could curse very easily. I was very religious in the synagogue, and these prayers meant a lot to me, and I realized it was easy to be religious. You just act religious. And then an hour later, I left the synagogue, and I'm swearing and cursing and lying, and that was easy. It was easy for me to be religious when I had to, and it was easy for me to be irreligious when I wanted to. Then when I was 17, I went to a famous music school in New York City called the Juilliard School. I was there for 5 years and got a bachelor's and a master's in piano. And there I met 3 students who called themselves devout Christians. Well, I don't know what devout was or not, but there was something about these students that was quite different. I saw one of them in the cafeteria having lunch. I saw another one of them taking a break from practicing. Whenever I saw these students separate, individually, they were always reading the Bible. I thought, the Bible? I mean, this is not a school of religion, it's a school of music. And whenever they got together, the three of them, all they did was talk about Jesus. Jesus said this. And why did Jesus say this? What did he mean when he said this? Jesus did this. What did Jesus mean when he did this? Why did he do? They never mentioned church. I had no idea about anything about church. They never mentioned the C word, which I call Christianity. It was always this person. Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus. Never ending. Well, they heard I was a religious Jew, and they asked me two questions. They asked me if I ever read the New Testament. So the Jews read the Old Testament, but not the New Testament. I said, oh no, I never read a word of that book. I said, I was told it's not for the Jews. You would never find a New Testament in our home. So I had no idea what was in it. I never saw one, I never read one, I never touched one. Zero knowledge. I had no idea what was in that book. They asked me if I thought if Jesus could be the Jewish Messiah. I said, well, the Jews are waiting for the Messiah. In Hebrew, the name is Mashiach, Messiah. And I said, but this Jesus is not the salvation for Jewish people. But again, I was very moral. You know, my parents almost died for me. They sacrificed for me. So I didn't want to shame them. So I never drank alcohol. To this day, I still don't know what a beer tastes like. Never been drunk. Never took any drugs. I lived in New York City from 1968 to 1973. That was the height of the Vietnam War. And there was this group called the hippies where you took drugs and you had sex and you could find happiness. Well, where I lived in New York City, uptown Manhattan, 71st Street and Broadway, it's not what drugs you wanted, it's how much drugs you wanted. There were drugs everywhere. I never took nothing. Never. Never had sex before marriage. So even though I was so moral on the outside, listen, no sex, no drugs, no drinking, I'm going to tell you, my friend, I was very, very immoral. Immoral. You know where? Right here. I knew that I was not on the inside the way I could appear on the outside. I could do many Jewish things, but it never affected me here. I was very moral. I was very religious, but not changed. Not changed. Not changed. So I made a big decision. I said, well, if I want to know about this person, Jesus Christ, I'm going to read this book, the New Testament. And that was a big step for a Jew to read this book. And I didn't want to talk to a rabbi or a Catholic priest or a minister. I'm going to read this book myself. Now, when I was a student at Juilliard, I used to practice for 10 hours a day. Now, let me tell you, that's not a lie, and that's not an exaggeration. I did not sit at the piano for 9 hours and 45 minutes. I sat every day at the piano for 10 full hours. I never left Juilliard until I completely practiced for 10 full hours a day. I started to read this book, the New Testament, and my whole life came to a stop. I was shocked when I read this book. Shocked. For the first time in my life since I started piano as a young boy, I completely stopped practicing. They gave me a little pocket New Testament, and they said, well, Sam, if you read this book, start in this book called The Gospel of John. I never heard of it. So sure enough, I take it, I look. There it is, sure enough, The Gospel of John. So here is a man, Jesus, who said of himself, and I'm quoting now, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Wow, are you kidding me? You know, the Jews read the first book of the Bible called Genesis, in Hebrew, in the beginning, or Bereshis, and God said, let there be light. And every Jew is taught that God is light. Every Jewish holiday begins the lighting of candles as a symbolism of God's presence. And now this Jesus says, I am the light. Here's a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the bread of life. Here's a man, Jesus, who said of himself, no person comes to God except through me. That's what he said. Here's a man who said of himself, he that has Jesus, the Son of God, has life. He who does not have the Son of God does not have life. He said these words, I am the vine, you are the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. No, no, no. Without God, I can do nothing. Oh, no, no, Sam. Without me, you can do nothing. Sam, you want to know God? You want to serve God? You want to honor God? You know me. You serve me. You honor me. Jesus said, you believe in God, the Almighty, you believe in me. There's no difference. The same adoration you give to the Almighty God, you give to me. Well, we're in a beautiful church, a whole remodeled, beautiful church. Let me tell you what I said to myself. I said, this person, Jesus, is too much. This man is a lunatic. I mean, really, you know who Moses is to the Jews? Moses never said he was the light of the world. Abraham, the father of the Jews, he never said he was the bread of life. I was shocked at what Jesus kept saying about who he was. Well, I said, I'm going to throw away this book. I'm going to go practice. And at that moment, I said to myself, if this person, Jesus Christ, is who he says he is, who are you, Jesus? You want to know who I am, Sam? I am the light of the world. And if you don't believe it, I'm still the light of the world. And if nobody believed it, I'm still the light of the world. If he is who he says he is, I may be making the biggest mistake of my life throwing this book away. I better listen to him. And then Jesus said he came for sinners. I was not a sinner. I was very moral and very religious. But he said he came to change us on the inside. Oh, yes. And he said he came to give us a new heart, a new birth, a new life, a spiritual heart, a spiritual birth, a spiritual life. So I've played concerts in 61 different countries. 61 different countries. I've been, I think, in every country in Asia except North Korea. I've been to India, 5 weeks of concerts. Australia, New Zealand, Japan. I've been all through Europe. I've been to a number of countries in Africa, South America. I've been to Cuba. I gave 28 concerts in communist Cuba. I went to Cuba when you couldn't go to Cuba, but I got in because I play classical music. And let me tell you what I've learned. I don't care if your skin color is green or red or purple or black or white. I don't care if you are a Democrat or Republican or independent or Communist Party or Socialist Party. I don't care what language you speak, what culture you're from, because this is the reality. This is the reality that I've seen in the world. Every person in this world, which is 8 billion, and every person in this room, we are experts at hiding things. Hiding things. Hiding things. You know what's the first thing man did when he disobeyed God? He hid. In fact, God had to say, where are you? He knew where he was. He wanted him to come out. You can hide things from your husband, your wife. You can hide things from your friends. You can hide things from your parents. You can hide things from a church. You can hide things from your boss. But nobody hides anything from this person, Jesus. In fact, it says that he knows everything we've done, and he knows and will reveal the motive of our hearts. And even though I was so moral and so religious, listen to me carefully, I thought I was clever enough with my tongue and crafty enough with my mind that I thought I could hide things from people and God. And on May 21st, 1971, 52 years ago, for the first time, I prayed to Jesus Christ. And I'm going to tell you what I said. My name is Sam Rottman. My name is Sam Rottman. And Jesus, I want you to take over my life. I want you to tell me what to do, and I will not tell you what to do. I told him the lies I said. I told the immoral thoughts I had. I told him the curse words. I hid nothing from him. You know something? You don't need to hide anything from Jesus because you don't hide anything from him. And I decided I'm not going to make any excuses. Do you realize you can come to the person of Jesus Christ and you don't need to give him an excuse for anything you've ever done in your life? In fact, if you give him an excuse, you're making it complicated. I finished praying. It was a long prayer. I opened up my eyes, and instantly, in a billionth of a second, I knew that Jesus Christ completely transformed me on the inside. I had a dirty, filthy mouth, and instantly he cleaned it and changed it. I was shocked I stopped cursing. I couldn't form a curse word with my lips. I had a dirty, filthy mind, and instantly it was completely cleaned and changed. And the next morning I woke up and I thanked Jesus Christ and thanked Jesus Christ and thanked Jesus Christ, and I couldn't wait to get to Juilliard, and I told every Jewish friend of mine in every practice room, I have been transformed and made a new person by the Messiah, and his name is, in Hebrew, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. I've played over 3,300 concerts, and all of my concerts are nothing. You know how much nothing is? That's my 3,300 concerts. They're nothing, nothing compared to having Jesus Christ. The greatest thing I ever did in my life, the most important thing I ever did in my life, was to give my life to Jesus Christ. Music's not the most important thing in my life. Jesus Christ is, because only Jesus Christ can transform your heart. Listen to me, my friend. Listen. Your wife can't change you. Your husband cannot change you. Your parents cannot change you. A church cannot change you. A religion cannot change you. The government cannot change you. In fact, you cannot change you. The hardest person to live with is yourself. But this is the miracle in this world. Listen, the miracle in this world is that Jesus Christ actually transforms a human heart. That's beyond a miracle. And he's done it to hundreds and hundreds of millions of people in 2,000 years, and I'm one of them, little me. You know I was Jewish? I was born Jewish. If I was born in Egypt, I would be a Muslim, and you would too. If I was born in Thailand, I'd be a Buddhist, and you would too. In fact, 99% of the world population is born into a religion. Why are you a Catholic? I was born a Catholic. Why are you a Muslim? I was born. Why are you a Mormon? Why are you a Hindu? I was born. But it's not a religion. It's not a religion. It's a person. It's a person. The central person of human history. You know, every time you go into a synagogue where Jewish people worship, you'll always find the same thing. And you know what it is? The 10 Commandments. Everyone knows the 10 Commandments. The law that God gave to the Jewish people through Moses. You know what you'll always see when you walk into a church? You know what I call it? Forgiveness. I know it's called a cross. I call it also forgiveness. And every time you see that cross, God's telling you, I have made a way to forgive you. Why don't you come to me and let me forgive you? Why don't you be forgiven and start a whole new life? Salvation is not what a person will ever do to be right with God or for Jesus Christ. Salvation is only what Jesus Christ has done for you. And he's done a lot. And I played the piano for him. He gave me the ears to hear the music, the fingers to play the music, the mind to learn the music. You know that Jesus has never missed one of my concerts. 2 people have never missed my concerts, Jesus and me. It's very real to me. And every time I give a concert in a church or a hall in Europe or with an orchestra, he's in the front row. I sit down to play, and he says to me, Sam, I'm really looking forward to hearing you play for me tonight. Listen, my friend, if I could look into your eyes, each one of you, I would tell you with every fiber of my being, listen, it is worth living for Jesus Christ. He's not hocus pocus. He's not a way for you to curse. He's not even a nice Christmas story. He is the life and the light of the world. Don't let anything become an excuse to keep you from the amazing life there is in Jesus Christ. Listen, my family for 1,000 years plus were Orthodox Jews. I had a million excuses. Your past can disappoint you. People can disappoint you. They're not worth it. He's worth it. And you can say like I did. Tell him your name. Jesus, my name is. Tell him your name. And I want you to take over my life. And he will. And I want you to forgive me. And he will. And I want you to be with me and guide me and help me. And he will, and he will, and he will. And you will experience a transformation of your heart. You will. Music gives me a lot of happiness, but not one note of music will change me. I'll play 30,000 notes tonight. Not one note will change me. But Jesus Christ changed me. Gave me a new life, my friend. It is worth living for him. It is worth living for him. Well, a short last piece. This is again by Debussy, the French composer. And it's about a juggler. It's called General Levine. It's a not very long piece. And Debussy went to see this American who was purported to be the world's greatest juggler. And he was. He came to perform in Paris, and Debussy wrote this piece. It starts off with a trumpet call. Ba-ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-bum. And this man comes out juggling, and he throws a pin way up in the air. It sounds like a mistake on the piano, because Debussy said the whole French audience gasped like this. And right as the pin that he was juggling was going to hit the ground, he grabbed it because he was the world's greatest juggler. It's a very comical piece, has some jazz in it, because when he came to Paris, this Mr. Levine, he brought a jazz band from New Orleans. So he remembers how this jazz band was playing. So it's the last piece, a short piece, very happy piece, very entertaining piece, General Levine, Eccentrique by Debussy. Thank you. Just for a minute, anybody have a question like to ask me? My life, my music, any question about anything you'd like to know? Anything? Yes, sir. Yeah, what did Beethoven's piano look like? Yeah. So to begin with, Beethoven, when he first started off, had a piano that was only 56 keys, so much smaller. He never knew an 88-key piano. That came about 25, 26 years after he died, actually. So eventually he had a 56-key piano, but eventually he went to a 72-key piano. And that was massive. That just opened up a tremendous amount. The other thing is that he didn't have a piano that was made of metal strings, like steel strings. It was gut. It was actually, and so it was not unusual that Beethoven was very powerful, very emotional in his playing, that sometimes in a concert he would break strings. So the piano was quite primitive. Let me just say it. I'm trying to be careful now what I say. In Beethoven's day, it got to develop when eventually they got it to be 88 keys and a steel strings and things like that. But the amazing thing is that here Beethoven wrote this music on sort of an inferior instrument, and he still envisioned what it could be, thinking that the piano would become maybe more developed and things like that and stronger. You know, and let me tell you, there's a piece that I play, it's called the Waldstein Sonata. And he wrote this piece when he got the 72-key piano. And he uses those keys that nobody ever used. He wrote a piece that went out to 72 keys. Now, Beethoven is deaf. He can't hear a note of it. He can hear it in his head, but he can't hear it with his ears. So here is a man writing for the first time for a piano that nobody had heard what the keys would be like and sound like. Here. This is it. I play the piece, the Waldstein Sonata. And those are the notes he's playing. And yet he could hear the power and envision the emotional power of what those keys were, even though he was totally deaf. That is mind-boggling. And he was asked once in a letter, where do you get the musical ideas? And he said, the music in my mind has been given me by the Almighty God, and I'm putting it down on paper for him. So I've played on Beethoven's piano a little bit. They didn't let me. I mean, you can't play a concert, you know. I don't think it would even hold up in a concert today. But this was in Vienna now, not in Bonn. But in Vienna, I played on his piano. And yeah, I mean, they were not what the pianos are today, you know. And I think what the pianos are today brings out tremendous amount of the emotion and the power of the music that Beethoven only envisioned emotionally and eventually would become a reality, you know. It was almost like an orchestra. I mean, Bach had 20 instruments. Now an orchestra is 100 instruments. Boy, you hear Handel's Messiah now. The Handel Messiah of the orchestra now, the power of it was not what Handel had. He didn't have those many instruments and the development and the technique that we have now. But boy, you know, but still almost visionary. You know what I mean? Visionary of the power of music to express emotions that you can't put into words, and it would bring 250 years later, you hear it and it makes you weep. Yeah. So, yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, let me say this. If you were cold 52 weeks a year, you would write very passionate music also. No. You know, I mean, that's a joke, but, you know, I've been to Russia, and it was pretty cold. In fact, I was once invited to go to play in Siberia in January. In January. I did not go. I did not go. But, yeah, Russian music is very emotional, very passionate. The father of Russian music is Tchaikovsky, who wrote tremendous. I mean, you go hear the Nutcracker. I mean, it is powerful. It is powerful. Yeah. So they're, you know, I guess the emotion of the Russian people. I'll tell you, I played in 61 countries, and you know who's my favorite audience to play for? It's the Russians. The Russians know every note that I played tonight. Under communism, they had no God, no hope, no food, but they had their art and their music. And these are not music teachers. These are factory workers. When I played in Russia in 1978, that's the first time I went to Russia, was in this is under communism. It was the Soviet Union. I played in a hall of 3,000 people. I came out on stage, and half of the audience had the music I was playing. They publish what Mr. Rottman's playing, Bach this, Beethoven this, Tchaikovsky this. That's very typical. When you go to New York, you'll always know what's on the program. You know this. And so they were following every note that I'm playing. Oh, I mean, it's a thrill. It's a thrill to play in Russia. I mean, they're the most educated audience in the world. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yes, sir. No, the harpsichord was first. The harpsichord was first, and the idea of a rod that plucked a string. And then in 1732, a man named Cristofori, an Italian man, had the concept of not having a rod pluck the string, but a hammer hitting the string, where you would make the string last longer. You see, the sound would last longer. On a harpsichord, you pluck it and it dies very quickly. But if you hit the string and it keeps vibrating, it lasts much longer, which means you could write music that sustains more. And so Cristofori in 1732 invented what was called the pianoforte, which means you could play soft and you could play loud. The harder you hit the string, the longer it would vibrate. So you could play loud, but on the harpsichord, it all sounds the same. Once you pluck it, you don't pluck it slowly, you pluck it, that's it. But on a hammer, you have degrees of how hard you will hit that string. So Bach heard the pianoforte. He only wrote for a harpsichord, but he heard about a year before he died. He died in 1750. In 1749, he heard a piano, and he said, I wish it would have been during my lifetime. He said that. And now most people play Bach on a piano, not on a harpsichord, you know. So that was before. And then the piano came out, and you know what happened to the harpsichord? It died out. Nobody was going to write for an instrument that couldn't sustain, you know. It went by way of the dodo bird, you know. It was done, you know. So nobody wrote music. You know, Beethoven didn't write a note for the harpsichord. Not a note, not a note. So it was taken over. Liszt, Chopin, you know, all the modern piano music is written for piano, not for harpsichord. It's much more, the harpsichord's much more inferior. But if you're a purist, like I know some people, they think you should play Bach only on the harpsichord because that's what he envisioned it being played on and what it sounded like. But you don't get the color nor the dynamics by playing it on a harpsichord. It's much more powerful on a piano, yeah, forte piano. So let me just close with this. We're going to sing, is that all right? A couple Christmas carols, since, you know, it's the time of the season. And I'll just play. You sing the first verse, and we'll go from there. Joy to the world, sing it out. Joy have a table over here, which has a few items. It has my playing of Beethoven. So there's a recording of 5 works by Beethoven, including the Moonlight Sonata. It also has a recording of French music, Debussy, very delicate. All the stress goes out of you. Very beautiful and delicate. And then there's a DVD of my whole story, my spiritual story. It's a DVD. I mostly speak and play on it as well. And then, I just wanted to share this. I'm not sure if I had this last time, but a number of years ago, I gave my story in a concert in Seattle, Washington, and a woman who owns a publishing company heard my story and published the Gospel of John. That's what I read when I came to faith in Jesus Christ. And she published my whole testimony, word by word. And she gives them to me for free. So they're for free. So if you'd like to take a booklet, if you take a few of them, then you could give them to somebody, you know, kind of handing them out. No, but if you want, the books are free. You can take what you'd like. But it's the Gospel of John, the Bible, with my testimony. The recordings, unfortunately, I have to pay royalties, so I have to charge you. No, they're $15, but the autograph is free. And about 25 years ago, I gave a concert in Arizona, in Green Valley, south of Tucson. I said, tonight, the autograph is $15 and the CD is free. And a man came up to me and said, I'd like a CD with no autograph. So, come on up here. Come on up here. Thank you. I'll be here. And then there's a reception with lots of goodies with lots of sugar.